bonjour. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning at our first President's Breakfast. Bonjour et bienvenue au premier petit-déjeuner du président de l'Hôpital Montfort. I'm Christine Segway, President and CEO of the Montfort Hospital Foundation, and I'm excited to welcome you, our table captains, who are some of our best champions, as well as many new guests here this morning. Aujourd'hui, nous avons le plaisir d'être accompagnés d'un bon nombre de personnes exceptionnelles qui travaillent au sein de l'Hôpital Montfort. Des médecins, des professionnels de la santé, des membres des conseils d'administration de l'hôpital et de la Fondation, des bénévoles, l'équipe de la Fondation, tous des personnes très dévouées qui veillent à la bonne santé de Montfort. Je salue donc tous les membres de notre grande famille. We're joined today by several of the hospital's key leaders, outstanding doctors, healthcare professionals, as well as members of the boards of the hospital and the foundation, so welcome, Montfort family. To our guests, you've taken the time to join us this morning, perhaps out of curiosity, interest to know more about healthcare in our city, or about friendship. You've made a decision that may save your life or the life of someone you love, but more about that later. As you probably know, the foundation exists to tell the story of the hospital, to attract and inspire community support, and to work with philanthropists to help them invest in better health care. Through the foundation, our community is invited to enhance the health care and services we provide. Through the foundation, our community has the opportunity to help provide the best care possible here at Montfort Hospital. This morning, you will hear from some of our most extraordinary doctors and from our talented and dedicated CEO, Dr. Bernard Leduc. You will also hear from Caroline Bisson, whose remarkable story will remind you why we are here this morning. And finally, you will hear from Lawrence Greenspan, who needs no introduction, as he is a well-known defense lawyer and a highly respected community leader. Lawrence has taken on the volunteer role as chair of our campaign to bring state-of-the-art equipment to our patients. Lawrence, we are so grateful for your leadership. My greatest hope is that when you leave here this morning, you will feel that you know today's Montfort and the breadth and scope of the services we provide. And that you will have a sense of how excellent programs at the Montfort can touch the lives of you, your loved ones, your family, your friends, your neighbors. I hope that you will be inspired by the commitment and dedication of the speakers you'll hear this morning, as much as they motivate and inspire me. Now let's begin our program. Healthcare in Ontario and in the Ottawa region has changed dramatically in the past decade, and perhaps nowhere more so than at our hospital. I've been at the Foundation now for 12 years, and in that time, everything about our hospital has changed, expanded, or been modernized. From the state-of-the-art family birthing center to our extended emergency department and operating rooms, we are a modern facility providing service for more than 200,000 patients every year. We've been fortunate for the past 6 years to have the strong and capable leadership of a dedicated CEO who has guided us through a massive transformation so that Montfort is now a critical part of our regional health care. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Bernard Leduc.
Merci, Christine. Mesdames, Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, what a great turnout. Somebody told me just a few seconds ago that, when Lawrence calls, people answer, and this is a testament to his leadership in the community. Alors, je vous remercie de votre présence ce matin. Fondé en 1953, l'Hôpital Montfort, par les Filles de la Sagesse, est aujourd'hui beaucoup plus qu'un hôpital communautaire servant la population francophone de Vanier. Let me share today my passion about the great work that we're doing today. You may not know, but Montfort of today is an acute care hospital with 289 beds, with a professional staff of 1,800, all compassionate and all committed to excellence and respect. We also have a good group of volunteers, and this being the Volunteer Week, I want to thank them for the great work that they're doing for our patient care at the hospital. Today we perform more than 10,000 surgeries and serve more than 50,000 patients in our emergency department each year. We have 128 beds in long-term care facility and 48 beds in our mental health program. We also have a bustling family birthing center, and more than 3,400 babies are born at the hospital each year. Today, Montfort is a francophone academic hospital that provides quality care for all we serve. We're actually very proud to provide care in both official languages 24 hours a day. I know that we have some of the best healthcare professionals in the country, more than 300 doctors, 464 nurses, as well as a myriad of technicians and other healthcare professionals. And if you haven't visited Montfort in the last few years, you probably don't know, half of our patients are Anglophone. So the perception that it's only for Francophone is not actually the populations that we're serving. En 2013, Montfort est devenu le premier hôpital francophone en Ontario à être désigné comme hôpital universitaire. Cela signifie que nous avons la responsabilité de former la prochaine génération de professionnels de la santé, la base en fait sur laquelle nous allons construire le système du futur. In 2013, Montfort became the first francophone hospital in Ontario to receive an academic hospital status. This means that we are helping to train the next generation of doctors and healthcare professionals. In 2015, we created the Institut du Savoir Montfort, an institute dedicated to creating and transmitting knowledge to improve patient care, support the loved ones, and the health of Ontario communities. And last fall, our newly created research institute entered the prestigious list of Canada's top 40 research hospitals. Yes, Montfort is already part of the 40 research hospital in Canada. Considering that our research institute was only created 4 years ago, that's quite the accomplishment, and we're very proud of that achievement. But we never want to sacrifice the highest quality care because of our larger professional teaching and research mandate. For the past few years, we have been focusing on delivering care of the highest quality so that we can respond to and even exceed patients' expectations. L'Association des infirmières et infirmiers de l'Ontario a accordé à Montfort la désignation d'organisme vedette en pratique exemplaire, démontrant que Montfort met en place des pratiques qui ont un impact positif sur les soins des patients. And in 2014, we received an accreditation with honorary standing. This is the highest level of accreditation in Canada and a true badge of honor granted by our peers. An accreditation with exemplary standing demonstrates that we provide the highest level of care and safety to our patients. Month after month, for the past year, new mothers giving birth to Montfort has given us a perfect note. But don't worry, there is always room for improvement, and we will keep striving to ensure that every patient has the best care and positive experience. Another key aspect of the massive transformation at Montfort has been our involvement in regional healthcare planning. That means that all hospitals of our region work together to provide the best care and improve access to care. A regional approach to emergencies saves lives. That means if you have chest pain in your office downtown, you may be brought to Montfort no matter where you live. Every 7 minutes, someone in our region has a heart attack. We never know whose life will be in our hands. Chaque jour, j'ai devant moi la preuve que nous disposons du meilleur personnel et d'installations exceptionnelles. Nos équipes sont extrêmement bien formées et elles sont toujours prêtes à l'action. Toutefois, à mesure que les technologies s'améliorent, nos diagnostics peuvent devenir plus précis. Une technologie à la fine pointe nous permettrait de sauver davantage de vies. Et voilà pourquoi nous savons qu'un nouveau tomodensitomètre avec module cardiaque spécialisé est si nécessaire pour nous permettre d'offrir les meilleurs soins possibles pour ceux dont la vie est menacée par une crise cardiaque. Lorsqu'il s'agit de sauver un être cher, on insiste sur les meilleurs soins et le diagnostic le plus précis. Lorsqu'il s'agit de sauver un être cher, on n'hésite pas de faire tout notre possible pour fournir l'aide nécessaire à leur survie. Avec un nouveau tomodensitomètre, nous aurons un outil puissant à notre disposition afin de mettre toutes les chances possibles de leur côté pour vous, pour vos êtres chers et pour les milliers de patients qui, chaque année, comptent sur l'Hôpital Montfort pour les remettre sur la voie de la santé. Sans doute que mes collègues vont être capables et mieux positionnés pour vous expliquer l'impact de cette nouvelle technologie sur les patients qu'on sert. I am convinced that we have the best staff, top-notch facilities, and that our people are trained and ready. However, as technology improves, diagnosis can also improve. With the most updated technology, we can save more lives. And that's why we know that a new CT scanner with a specialized cardiac module is urgently required so that we can provide the best care for people at Montfort who experience a life-threatening heart attack every year. If it's someone you love, you want the best care and the most accurate diagnosis. If it's someone you love, you wouldn't hesitate to do everything you could to improve whatever they need. With a new CT scanner, we will have an even greater opportunity to provide the best for you, your loved ones, and thousands of others who come to us every year. My colleagues at Montfort will and can explain far better than I what the true impact of this new technology. I can merely suggest to you that your generosity can and will make the best care possible available for every person who needs our help. Every day, in French or English, no matter what the reason. We will be there for them when they need us most. We will be there for you when you need us most. With your support, we will keep striving to provide the best care for all we serve. I became a physician inspired by the story of my father, who actually had dialysis when he was 46. He actually received a kidney transplant the night before my interview at the Faculty of Medicine. And after that, even if his graft was successful, he lived for 16 years, he had multiple different medical conditions that required easy access, precise diagnosis, and I could appreciate how important that was. And we want to provide the same level of care and the availability of the finest technology to all of our patients that we are serving at Montfort. So thank you very much, and thanks for being here today. And now it's my privilege to invite Dr. Chamoun to the podium. We are so fortunate to have one of Canada's foremost cardiologists practicing at Montfort. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Chief of Medicine, Dr. Chamoun.
Merci, Dr. Leduc. Bonjour à tout le monde. Thank you very much for coming here. I want to talk to you about heart attack. Heart attack, the top killer. What do we know about heart attacks? The facts are that heart attacks happen most of the time in people who never had any prior symptoms. They had no warning, no history of angina, and suddenly they have a heart attack. Most people think that heart attacks happen in people who have had problems, and it's not true. Over 80% of heart attacks happen in people who have had no prior symptoms. Everyone is at risk. We all have some cholesterol plaques in our arteries, and these plaques can get us into trouble. We cannot predict heart attacks because the mechanism of heart attacks is unpredictable, and I will explain to you why. Maybe we can do something to prevent them. We can at least try. So what is the cause of a heart attack? We have plaques in our arteries in the heart that cause narrowing in the arteries. But that narrowing does not have to be severe for the heart attack to happen. You can have a mild narrowing in the artery, and then suddenly that plaque ruptures, and now there is a blood clot that forms and closes the artery 100%. So you can start with a 20% blockage in your artery, and within minutes, it goes to 100%. And that's why 20% will not give you any symptoms. Even when you exercise, you can run the marathon. And then when that plaque ruptures and causes a blood clot, and the artery now is 100%, you're having a heart attack. What we're trying to prevent the death of the muscle of the heart. This black area here, this is a heart attack. This is what kills people. If you have many of these scar tissue, multiple heart attacks, it weakens the heart muscle, the pump doesn't function properly, and people die of something we call congestive heart failure. But worse than that, these scar tissues caused by heart attacks, if you survive the heart attack, you can have an arrhythmia, because that area here is a substrate for an arrhythmia. The heart is irritable, and people die suddenly. So if you look at the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body, but also pumps blood to itself through these arteries in red. We call them the coronary arteries. And these arteries, when they are filled with cholesterol plaques, this yellow thing here, and it starts at a young age, the cholesterol plaques do not narrow the artery enough to cause symptoms or to show on a stress test. And these plaques are dangerous because when they rupture, they close the artery. I'm going to tell you about a patient that came to me years ago, and he was very upset, and he wanted an explanation. AJ, and I call AJ the brother, because AJ, he came to my office for a second opinion. He was upset. His younger brother died a year prior to his workup. His brother had a massive heart attack and died. And AJ went to see his family doctor to say, what is my risk? Is the same thing going to happen to me? So the family doctor appropriately referred him to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist appropriately ordered a stress test. And AJ was not feeling any symptoms, completely asymptomatic, but he smoked, his cholesterol was high. So what did the stress test show? The stress test came back normal. He had a normal stress test. He passed it. And he was told he had no significant blockages. He was discharged from the clinic, and he was given an advice to quit smoking and change his diet. But AJ didn't. 5 months later, he was sitting watching TV and suddenly felt a chest tightness going to his throat. He had difficulty breathing, and he was getting worse. He became sweaty. He called 911. They did an ECG, they diagnosed him with a heart attack, and he was taken urgently to the cath lab at the Heart Institute, and he had an angiogram and a stent. So he was upset that the stress test did not pick up the blockage months before, and he wanted an explanation. This is not his angiogram, but this is what his angiogram looked like, and you can see here this blockage right here, and filled with clot. And this is after a stent placement. This spot here in the heart, we call it the widowmaker because it kills a lot of people. So I explained to AJ that the artery, when it's filled with plaques, it narrows and it prevents the blood flow to flow normally in the arteries. Usually you need more than 70% blockage in order to have any kind of symptoms. Angina when you're running, chest pain or shortness of breath. But he didn't have more than 70%. He probably had 40 or 50% blockage. What we do with the stress test, we're able to pick up a blockage that is more than 70%. So somebody comes to my office and he says, every time I run, I get chest pressure. I do a stress test, it is abnormal. I do an angiogram and I find an artery that is blocked more than 70%. And then we put a stent, and this is what the stent looks like. And this is how we deploy the stent. There is a balloon sitting on the stent, you inflate the balloon, and the stent sitting on the balloon, you inflate the balloon, and then you remove the balloon, the stent stays in place, and it stays in place forever. And it opens the blockage. This is useful in people who are having heart attacks or people who have stable angina, and we find an 80% blockage, and now they can go back and play golf without having symptoms. But unfortunately, over 80% of heart attacks do not happen in blockages that there are 80%. You can have an 80% blockage and have angina, and it will remain 80%. But the 40% blockage that is scary, because that 40%, and I'm going to go through this picture because it's a little bit complicated. This is a picture of the coronary artery, and then we're slicing it here like you sliced bread, and we're looking in the short axis. And because the light here is too bright, but you can see here there is these yellow, and then this is the lumen, the opening of the artery. What happens, this is a 20-year-old, and as we get older, these plaques started building up in the wall of the artery. You can have a lot of cholesterol in the wall of the artery without obstructing the lumen of the artery. So you can have a 10% blockage. When you put a dye here, you will see there is only mild narrowing, but a lot of the plaques is actually sitting in the artery. Eventually, that plaques will narrow the artery further and further, and then when you get to more than 70% narrowing, you start getting symptoms. But what happens is at any stage in this process, even when it's 20%, you can have a rupture of this plaque. It's like an eggshell protecting that plaque, and it ruptures. And then it mixes with the blood, and it forms a blood clot and causes a heart attack suddenly. So you go from 40% to 100%. And this is what's scary about heart disease. This is a real picture of a patient that we took the blood clot out. So we sucked it out when he was having the heart attack. And this is what you see. This is what's causing the heart attack. So this is the cholesterol plaque that ruptured, mixed with blood. The blood coagulates, forms a clot, and this blocks the artery 100%. Stress tests are useful in finding more than 70% blockages, but if you have a 50%, it will not show. You will have a normal stress test, but that doesn't mean that you can continue to smoke or lead a bad lifestyle. So what happens if you do an angiogram and I tell the patient you have a 40% blockage? What happens to that 40%? Well, three things can happen. It can remain the same forever till you're 100. It can progress slowly and it becomes 50, 60, 70, and then over 70 you start getting symptoms with exertion. Or it can rupture suddenly, and within minutes it can go to 100 or 99% and causes a heart attack. We all have these plaques in our arteries. We all do. Some have more than others. So how do we know which plaque, what's going to happen to that plaque? Well, not all plaques are the same. Some plaques are stable, they will remain like this forever, and some will rupture, are called unstable plaques. This is a picture of a vulnerable plaque. You can see this is the cut of the coronary artery, and the cholesterol plaque is sitting, and the artery is blocked maybe 60%. It's not causing any symptoms. And then when it ruptures, the blood closes the artery completely. This is actually a picture of a CT angiogram showing a narrowing less than 70%, let's say 50%. That should not cause chest pain. So if we cannot predict, we don't have the ability now to know which plaque is stable and which plaque is unstable. So basically, we cannot predict which plaque is going to rupture. So if we cannot predict that, then can we prevent it? Well, they tried stents. To put stents in a 50% blockage, they made it worse. You actually can destabilize the plaque and you make it prone to rupture. So what do we do? Well, medications really are the key treatment. In Framingham, they followed 3 generations of families to look at answers, why people get heart attacks. And they gave us a list of what we call the traditional risk factors. The more risk factors you have, the higher your risk of having a heart attack. And these are age, family history, whatever happens to your brother, your father, your sister, your mother might happen to you. Cholesterol, especially bad cholesterol, diabetes, and hypertension. The more of these risk factors you have, the higher the risk. So the other issue is that we do stress tests on patients sometimes, and it shows that it is positive. They might have a blockage. They might have an artery blocked more than 70%. And a lot of time, it can be false. We call that a false positive result. Before the CT scan, the only way to know if the stress test is truly positive, that the patient has a blockage or not, was to do an angiogram. And that's what I do for a living. I put catheters in people's groin or wrists, and we go up with the catheter. We inject a dye into these arteries, and we take a picture, and we identify the blockage. It is low risk, but still it has risks, this procedure. So you go from a stress test that is false positive, you have no blockage, we do the angiogram, put you at risk to prove that it is not true. And this is what we would see as a blockage on an angiogram. The CT scan will change that. The CT scan will be able to prove or disprove the stress test non-invasively, without having to insert catheters. This is the exact picture of a CT scan we're getting at the Montfort. It's the state of the art. It's one of the best on the market. It is clear. This is a picture of an invasive angiogram, and this is a picture of a CT angiogram. And you can see the artery very clearly. It is quick, takes a few minutes, a breath hold. You inject a dye, and then you process the images. It is accurate. We can see the whole heart with one picture. So what is the role of the CTA is going to be? Can't do CTA on everybody walking on the street just to look for plaques. Because everybody, I assume that all my patients have plaques. I have plaques. Everybody has plaques. So what is the role will be? It can identify the plaques early, that is true. And what we want to pick up is the people who have probably more plaques than others, people with family history, with risk factors. The patient who says, my brother died with a heart attack, what's going to happen to me? And he's refusing to take a cholesterol pill, for example. I might convince him to take the pill because he has a lot of plaques. I can risk stratify patients better. It can identify severe blockages non-invasively. It can prove or disprove a stress test result. But remember something, the CT will not be therapeutic. It will not fix the blockage. If you need an angiogram, you need an angiogram, and you cannot put a stent through the CT. So people who need the invasive angiogram, they will still need it. It will not replace it. So in conclusion, stress tests detect only blockages more than 70%. Most heart attacks happen from blockages less than 70%. Patients have absolutely no symptoms, no warning. Stress tests cannot predict plaque rupture, cannot predict heart attacks, but if you have a normal stress test, it's still a good thing. It's better than to have an abnormal stress test. Because if you have more than 70% blockage, the chance that you have other 40, 50, 30, 20 is very high. And it's a matter of statistics. The more plaques you have, the higher the chance of one of these plaques rupturing and causing a heart attack. CT angiogram and invasive angiogram can identify blockages less than 70%, but we treat them with medications. Plaque rupture is the cause of most heart attacks, and mechanism of plaque rupture is very complex. Unstable plaques tend to rupture, but right now we don't have any test that can say this plaque is stable or this plaque is unstable. Maybe in 20 years. So far, we don't have that ability, and prevention is always better than treatment. CTA, CT angiography will be able to diagnose patients with chest pains quickly, accurately, and it will be able to help us do the preventative treatments. Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce my esteemed colleague and friend, nicest guy you will ever meet, Dr. André Olivier, the Chief of Radiology. André.
Bon matin à tous. Merci. So I'll take 10 minutes of your time and hopefully give you a quick and friendly introduction to X-rays, to CAT scanners, and if all goes well later today, you'll be able to impress your friends with your new knowledge. And the way I'd like to do this introduction is by actually introducing you to three important different people. Our first person is Wilhelm Röntgen. So I need you to go back to the year 1901. And in 1901, the very first Nobel Prize in physics was handed out. And as it turns out, it was handed to Wilhelm Röntgen for his discovery of X-rays. So if we have a look at his laboratory, or actually it's a replica of his laboratory, and we'll zoom in on his desk, we can see these are vacuum tubes. They're specific, this one's shielded by lead, but what Röntgen was experimenting with were different types of vacuum tubes through which he was passing electrical currents. It was known that these sorts of tubes could generate light, but what he was able to find is with specific types of tubes, by shielding them so that no light could get out, he was still able to cause some glowing on these. He was using these phosphorescent plaques, and he was able to cause them to glow. So for him, what that indicated is that there was some sort of ray or of beam that was exiting the tube and making it to these plates. At the time, he didn't know what these beams or these rays were, so he called them unknown rays, or his shorthand in his books were X-rays. So the term X-rays kind of stuck. And with time, he was able to further develop this new technology, and he was able to capture images that were more permanent. This is one of his first X-ray images. It turns out to be his wife's hand. We'll speculate it's the left hand. This would be her wedding ring here. So this was the beginning of X-rays. It's quite surprising how quickly news of this discovery spread. This is an X-ray tube that was made in England, and it was only done a year after his discovery. He was quite a generous fellow. He didn't want to keep the patent or keep the discovery to himself. He wanted to share it. So within a year, we're seeing X-ray tubes being created across Europe. This is a picture of an early X-ray machine. This is from the London Science Museum, and it's a picture I happened to take last summer when I was visiting. Sadly, it also shows you what I like to do when I'm on holidays. I go around the world and take pictures of X-ray machines. It's not easy being a radiologist. So now if we flash forward, this is pretty much a modern X-ray tube, but the concept is the same from what was originally created. We have a current that's passed through here to a filament. We don't see the filament very well. The current causes the filament to generate electrons. There's a voltage across the tube, so the electrons come across and hit a little tungsten plate that's on the other side. The electrons interact with the tungsten and generate these X-rays that then exit the tube. Sounds a bit complicated, but really it's not all that different from something that we're much more familiar with, which is a camera flash. In a camera flash, a current is passed through a filament, and it generates, in this case, visible light. And then from your flash, the light, in this case, again, visible light bounces off an object or a person, and the light is captured in a detector. Your X-ray machine is really not all that different. You've got your X-ray tube that's in this portion here, and your detector that's up here. The main difference between the two is here you want to place your object or your patient between the detector and the flash. And with that technology, you're able to take X-rays like this X-ray of the skull. And essentially his original discovery before the Nobel Prize was 1895, so for about 75 years, We had x-rays that were being produced. The technology was developing, but there wasn't much more, there wasn't a great leap until this fellow came along. This is Sir Godfrey Hounsfield. He was an electrical engineer in England and worked for Electric and Musical Industries, or EMI was the company. His main interest was computers. So if we go back to 1958, he helped develop one of the first, I don't know if you call this a laptop or a desktop computer, a room full of computers. This was the first transistor-based computer that was built in England. So we're looking at 1958. The story goes that sometime after this, Hounsfield was out for a walk in the British countryside, and he started to hatch an idea where if you took an X-ray tube, and rather than a general tube, it would produce a beam that was almost like a pencil beam, and it would go across to a detector. And what he would do is he would move the tube and the detector along the object or the patient and take a series of measurements. As it turns out, for the first CAT scanner, it was about 80 measurements. Then he would move the whole apparatus 1 degree, take another set of measurements, move it another degree, take another set of measurements, and do this for 180 degrees. And then this is where his computer background came in. He would take that information, feed it to a computer, and also there was new mathematical formulas being developed at the time that would then allow for that information to be processed and to create a map or a picture of what was going on inside the object rather than just a single X-ray picture. And with that, I mean, I'm doing a bit of a leap here. We're going to 1971, but this was the first CAT scanner produced by EMI, and at the time just limited to CTs of the head. You can see how this is, we were looking before at the X-ray tube and the detector and how that part would move. Well, this was the basic concept. So the very first CAT scan of a patient, we're looking at 1971, was when the first image was obtained. And here's our first CAT scan slice. This is one slice of a series of studies. If you move the patient, you can take a series of slices. Each of these slices took 5 minutes to acquire. You compare that later, we'll talk about the modern CT, one slice, 0.3 seconds. So there's been a bit of development that's been done. So this is 1971 and our first CAT scan. The processing time for the first CAT scan, the computer processing time, 2.5 hours. So they weren't doing that many per day. A little side note about EMI is that there was no way they could know how profitable or how important CAT scans would become. And they had to put some money into this research. As it turns out, luckily, EMI had a rather successful musical division, and it was partially successful because in 1962, it had signed on these 4 lads here. You might know them as the Beatles. And so to a certain extent, you can say that the Beatles helped fund the development of the CAT scanner, to a certain extent. My third person I'd like to introduce you to is less well known than our first two. He doesn't have a Nobel Prize, at least not yet. He doesn't have a knighthood. He does have one big advantage, is that he's still alive and well and still doing research. And Dr. Willie Callender. And to explain a bit what he did, we'll start by explaining what happened with CT technology over the next 15 years after 1971. This is one of Toshiba's first, actually their first body CT. And so with the technology, they were able to do advances, obviously, in computer technology, detector technology, and they were able to start producing images that had a lot more detail. You'll notice again, and this will be a recurring theme for the next few slides, is that these are all CTs of objects that don't tend to move around very much like a head. It's easy to immobilize a head. The main problem that they were having is that, so in a CT you had the moving part to take the rotating part and the non-moving part on the outside. So for those 15 years, those two components were connected with wires. So no matter how fancy you were, how quickly you can spin your CAT scanner around, you had to untwist it. So when I started in Calgary in '94, we had one that was quite fancy. It did 2 turns, but it still had to untwist itself. That's okay for a CT of the head, but when you're doing, say, a chest or an abdomen, you have to ask the patient to breathe in, hold their breath, you do your 1 or 2 slices, then they breathe, you uncoil your scanner, you move them down whatever distance, your thickness of your slice, and you do it again and again and again. So to, say, scan an abdomen and a pelvis, you were looking at 20 minutes. So with 20 minutes, there'd be some movement. You could, if you were to inject a contrast or something, that you wouldn't get an image of the area over a short span of time. It would be over a long span of time. So finally, we'll come to Dr. Callender. And he, I don't know if he so much developed it, but he put in, because slip rings had been used elsewhere, but he developed the use of slip rings in CT. And this is the moving part of the CT here. So rather than wires, they started using these slip rings. And what it allowed the scanner to do is to keep moving. This portion here, this is where the non-moving part of the scanner connects to the moving part. And the connection was with these brushes that were developed. The brushes allowed the current to constantly pass from the ring to the non-moving part of the scanner. So the scanner could just turn and turn and turn as much as needed. So rather than taking a slice, what they could do, that the scanner would be the black line, is to gradually move the patient through the scanner and acquire a volume of information. And as the scanner is turning, it looks pretty much like a helix or a spiral. So if you compare that to, say, this spiral staircase, this is where we had the development with Dr. Callender of the spiral CT or the helical CT. So if we look back again at our pictures, now we had a volume of information that was acquired in a short period of time. And this is when we were able to finally develop or to create these sorts of three-dimensional recreations. We had a volume of information, we had faster computers, but also we could start looking at things like vessels because we were able to take the image in a short period of time. Again, we'll notice that I'm still talking about the head and the brain. We were able to do some CT angio of the abdomen, the pelvis, but the idea of imaging a heart, which was completely unthinkable back in Hounsfield's time, and even still not really realistic with these scanners, was still not quite there in terms of imaging something beating quickly like the heart. And so this is where we need to do another leap in technology. So I'll hand you on to our next radiologist, Dr. François Leduc, who will take you from where we're at with scanners, where we were at scanners at this point, now to our modern cardiac CT scanner. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Merci beaucoup, Dr. Olivier. It's a pleasure for me to talk here, and I'm quite impressed by the big turnout for this great cause. So I'm here to explain to you cardiac CT. That's why we're all here, so let's learn more about it. Now, we've learned how important coronary artery disease is by Dr. Chamoun and the evolution of CT scanners by Dr. Olivier. And they've come a long way in the past decade and a bit. At first, Dr. Callender developed the one-slice single detector CT. So there was one detector that would spin like a slice, a helix, around the patient, and the table would move slowly. And that was great for acquiring most applications if you wanted to scan the head or the chest. But a heart, which measures about 8 centimeters top to bottom, that was moving, you couldn't really scan it this way. And how technology evolved a few years after that is how about we add a bunch of detectors, several detectors, and that's how cardiac CT started off. So you had several detectors covering several centimeters, and that would scan. Each slice, scanning around the patient, would cover a bit more area, and that's how cardiac CT started about a decade or so ago. And this is what it looked like. This is just a diagram. So at the top, you have an ECG tracing. You need to put ECG leads on the patient and map out the heartbeat to the CT scanner, and you relay this information. There's a purple bar that's running at the top, and that's basically the CT scanner that's on, and is taking an entire picture of the heart through multiple beats. And that was okay, and it worked well, but it had some limitations. Number one, it was slow, because you had to take multiple beats, not that big of a slice, and it was scanning around the patient. It was also sensitive to if there was irregular heartbeats. You can imagine if you're going to stitch all this together, but the heart beats like this and then beats like that, and it changes. Well, when it's stitched together, it's going to be irregular. Also, you were acquiring a top of the heart at a different time point than the bottom of the heart in terms of a heartbeat. So this anatomy was different across the different time points. And you injected dye, and when it would run through, that dye was obviously not staying in one spot. It was following blood. And so that dye was not uniform across the entire heart. Probably one of the bigger ones, too, was a bigger radiation dose. Because the scanner was on, that purple bar the entire time, you were getting doses, and we use millisieverts, and I'll give you a reference point. It was about 8 to 17 millisieverts. If you were alive for a year at sea level, you get about 3 millisieverts. If you were getting a chest x-ray, you get 0.1 millisieverts. That's the equivalent to being just alive for about 10 days. So the radiation dose in these early CTs was higher. So they said, well, maybe we don't need to take a picture of the heart the entire time. Let's do a step and shoot. So you tell the CT scanner that you just want to take a picture around right here, and you do it across multiple beats. So that's what it looks like. Take a picture there, table moves down, take another picture of the heart, et cetera, and then you stitch it all together. And that was the next generation of CT, probably how it's most commonly done on older generation CTs and done in a lot of hospitals actually currently. And this was also good, but you needed a heartbeat to move the table. You also had longer scan times because you had multiple heartbeats and therefore more contrast dose and still a little higher radiation dose, but not as high as the other method. And again, you had some non-uniformity. You also had this banding or stitching artifact that was more prominent compared to the other way because you were actually stitching different scans together. So CT or MDCT, multi-detector CT, evolved. At first it was 4 detectors that covered about 2 millimeters, evolved to 16 detectors, 64 detectors, which is what Montfort currently have and a lot of hospitals do. This is what was most commonly used to do this step and shoot method or stitching method, and that covered about 3.2 centimeters. There was an 80 detector that came out a few years later, but not significantly different from the 64 detector. Well, the technology that Montfort is going to acquire, or this Toshiba Aquilion 1 CT, has 320 detectors. So that's 16 centimeters. So that's a 4-fold change from technology to technology. If you make a parallel to computers, imagine getting something 4 times more performant. That's where we're going for here. And I mentioned that the top of the heart to the bottom of the heart is 8 centimeters. Well, this covers it in one spin, with some at the top and some at the bottom, because not everyone's heart is the same. It's a very concise machine. This is the donut of where the bore or the gantry where the images are taken. There's no external moving parts. You just hear a little bit of a buzzing noise and that's it, and it's very quick. And this table can be moved in many different directions, which is very useful for a variety of patient sizes and applications. And here's a nice diagram that basically shows you how fast a 320 slice cardiac CT works. I'll play this. So this is, again, the ECG tracing, and you're going to tell the CT scanner that you want to take a picture here. This is the patient, obviously the heart. Patient's arm would be at the top. And you run the machine, ECG goes, machine spins, boop, picture taken, machine stops, works for a few seconds, and then there you go, got your picture. So that's a fraction of a second. That's how quick it was. So that moment, the moment of radiation that the patient is getting is only that thin little bar. That's how quick it is. And just how quick can it be? Well, we can get it down to 0.275 seconds. So almost a quarter of a second, pretty much hovering around a third of a second. That's as like you snap your finger and the picture is taken. Why is that important? Well, the heart's a moving organ, obviously. It's a small one, and these coronary arteries that Dr. Chemuin talked about are only a few millimeters thick. So if something's moving, and they're tiny, and they're not always the same place, you really want to have the highest technology to be able to take a picture of these and be able to assess plaque, which is even smaller than the artery. So that's why you need this highest end technology to be able to diagnose it. And so basically, in one heartbeat, you can get the entire heart, one phase of contrast, basically one pass of this contrast through the blood system. You don't only get the heart, but you get around the entire lungs around the area in one pass. And this is all in one spin of the scan. So one scan, no need to repeat it multiple times. And this is basically pictures that we get on a day-to-day basis for looking at the plaques in the vessels. Here you have the heart, and these are the coronary arteries all laid out. And so the radiologist or the cardiologist that's looking at the pictures basically has this on their console, and you run every major artery down, and you look for any tiny plaques, and you can get in multiple different views. And this one, remember I talked before, 8 to 17 millisieverts for the initial dose of radiation for the first CTs. We can get this down to below 1 millisievert. So this one can be down to 0.8. So this is extremely low radiation. And the population base that typically gets cardiac CTs are a bit older, so the radiation is not really an issue in that case. But the significant change, almost a 10-fold change in radiation, is very significant. And you can make movies. If you want to show a 3D view, sometimes the cardiac surgeons need this information for mapping it out so they get an exact picture of what they're going to see when they get in there. It's great to have fancy hardware and the state-of-the-art, but you also need software that's state-of-the-art to back it up, and this machine is also paired with such software. One of these, for example, is we know that you can imagine plaque that has a lot of calcium is very bright, and stents, like Dr. Chemuin talked about, are very bright. Well, bright sort of shadows out things in small vessels, and so it's known as artifact. And it's known that this is one of the pitfalls of coronary artery imaging. Well, newer software can actually subtract. What it does, it takes the bright from a stent or a calcified plaque, takes the bright from the contrast that went through, and basically does an algorithm and subtracts it and can give you a picture of what the lumen looks like, or inside the vessel, and that's what it looks like here. This is relatively recent technology that's now able to assess these kind of difficult cases. And it doesn't just do coronary arteries, you can also assess the heart muscle. Mind you, this is not the most common indication for it, but for example here, in this yellow box, you have a plaque that's blocking up this artery. Stress means that we gave medication and basically stressed the heart, and this donut here is a cut of the left ventricle, and the red is the heart muscle. So you've stressed the heart medically, and you can see, and this is at rest without the stressing, and this blue area is an area that has decreased perfusion or decreased blood flow. So you're able to say, oh, that heart part is not working well at stress. And again, this CT is not just for cardiac imaging. This CT is going to be used for a whole host of basically everything done at Montfort for CT. It does, if a patient comes through the emerge and needs a CT of the head or a chest or of the belly, same thing in ICU or on the ward. And then the whole host of patients coming from just outpatient, day-to-day stuff ordered by their family doctor or other referring services. This CT can be done. It just happens to be high-end technology optimized for cardiac CT. To give you an example, this is a patient who was found to have an abnormal tangle of blood vessels in the brain. It's a similar picture that what Dr. Olivier showed. Well, because of how fast it is, we can basically capture a movie of these blood vessels coming into the brain and help with the clinicians mapping out how they're going to treat it. And this is what the video would look like. And once it stops, you can see here that this is this tangle, an aneurysm or a vascular malformation. And you can play this slowly, and you can see exactly which vessel is coming in to touch that vascular malformation. So to go back, well, why is this important, fancy technology, but why is this important? Well, it basically ties into what Dr. Chamoun said. We know that coronary artery disease is a top killer, like he said. It's very important, multiple causes, and can cause serious problems such as chest pain, heart attack, death, irregular heartbeats, cardiac failure, cardiac decompensation, like he mentioned. And coronary artery CT can find these, and can find these very well, almost as good as catheter angiogram. Now, cardiac CT will never replace all of those. It won't replace ultrasound. It won't replace nuclear medicine. But it's still very useful for detecting these plaques non-invasively. So here you have a picture of the heart and the plaques, and then we can see these white calcified plaques are all over the place, and we would basically comment on most of these or all of these and tell you exactly where they are and basically give a roadmap to the referring physician so they know the burden of plaque in this patient. And you can quantify it. You can say this is 30%, 50%, 60%, and so on. And like was mentioned, it has very good correlation with what plaques look like on catheter angiogram, which is the gold standard. You always have to have the gold standard to compare to, and this is what it looks like. And this is on your CT, the 3D volume, and this is the typical image that we would use on a day-to-day basis to diagnose these plaques. So you can see that they mirror each other very well. Now, technology evolves, and cardiac CT is not necessarily in its infancy, but maybe its teenagehood in terms of where it's at with proven indications. And it's become quite so proven that multiple major institutions, the American Heart Association and this alphabet soup of people, have come out with guidelines about how we're going to use cardiac CT. And cardiac CT, basically now its indications, I won't read the slide for you, but I'll summarize it, is it's a very good test to rule out disease. It's not made for the test where the patient is having a heart attack, or you think that there's a very high risk or high risk. That patient should go on to an angiogram if indicated. Because if you do a CT and you diagnose plaque, you can't do anything about it on the spot, so you're wasting time. So the cardiac CT is very useful for the patient where there's lower intermediate risk, and you just want to make sure that they have no plaque. So it has very high negative predictive value. The patient comes into the emerge and they are having chest pain, but the workup is negative for heart disease, biochemically, ECG, clinically, but you still suspect it. If you did a CT and they have no plaque or very little, they almost get out of jail free card from a cardiac standpoint for about 5 years. So that's how powerful it is. Same thing for people on the ward. If they're sitting on the ward, they're waiting a transfer to the Heart Institute, for example, for a catheter angiogram, and they're of low or intermediate risk, and you do a cardiac CT. If they have no plaque, there's no cardiac cause for this problem here. There's also other reasons to investigate it. If you have anomalies of the coronary arteries, the heart itself, and because this is an evolving technology and all of these guidelines were based on a 64 slice quality CT, don't be surprised in the next 5-10 years plus that cardiac CT will take a bigger and bigger role in terms of its importance. So we're at the forefront of this evolving technology. So to summarize the advantages, it's very quick. Less than a second to me is pretty quick. It's non-invasive. There's no putting a catheter in anywhere. You have to give dye, so you put a little IV in, like same way as drawing blood off. It's highly accurate. It shows the plaque that it should show, and like I mentioned, it's very useful for negative prediction. You can have very high anatomical detail, and you can see the heart as well as outside the heart. And that is all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, doctors. I learn something every time I hear you speak. Our final speaker today is Caroline Bisson. In 2009, doctors amputated Caroline's left arm, shoulder, and part of her rib cage to stop the spread of a rare form of bone cancer. 5 years later, she competed in a biathlon and cross-country skiing events at the Paralympic Games in Sochi. Caroline is with us today to talk about her medical experience. Welcome, Caroline.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui. I'd like to thank the doctors for the very informative session. I know as a patient, I liked the whole way through my journey, I liked to know what was being done to me. I wanted to understand what was happening to me. So I think that most of us could have learned something from this because, as Dr. Chamoun said, we're not immune to the possibility of having to deal with heart problems or heart failure. I know it runs in my family, so I was quite interested in what was being told to me, and I will keep a lot of key messages in my mind as I move through. I'm here today to share parts of my story, mostly to show you the importance of getting local care, the importance of getting the right diagnosis at the right time, and also to show you the importance of equipment in this whole process. So I was diagnosed with a malignant bone tumor, which took root in my left scapula, and that was 7 years ago. And the amputation was the only remedy for this type of tumor. And I went through 3 amputations in the course of 7 months because the cancer recurred several times. As you can imagine, it was a very tumultuous period of my time, of my life. I'd say it was probably the biggest storm of my life. And the word I would use to characterize that period is distress. Everything was happening very quickly. I was being told that they'd have to amputate part of my shoulder, and then I was being told that I had to amputate again, and then eventually they cut off the arm and part of the rib cage, and it just kept on going in that direction to the point where I was asking myself, at one point in time, they'll have to cut off my neck, and that'll be it. So it was a very extremely stressful period of my life, and because of the difficult path I had to follow to get a diagnosis, I eventually, I ended up being treated at the General Hospital in Montreal. And during that period of 7 months, I was going through my agenda last night, and I counted that during that period, I went to Montreal 32 times. That's a lot of kilometers, a lot of time. And at one particular time, right before my second surgery, things were happening so quickly that I traveled to Montreal 7 times in the course of 10 days. And every time I came back home, to my home, to sleep in my bed. People would tell me, why didn't you just stay there? Because at that time of my life, I was in distress, and I just needed to be back home, to feel the comfort of my own blanket, of my own pillow, and to be close to my family, and to feel that comfort. That's what I needed at that time. So I'm telling you all this because to show you the importance of having local care. And yes, I traveled to Montreal. For some people, think of your aging parents, just traveling 45 minutes or an hour can be a long time. So this hospital, the Montfort Hospital, is at the heart of our community. I've lived in and was born and raised in La Basse-Ville, Ottawa, just close to here. My parents still live there, and I feel good knowing that this institution is here and it can serve my parents with great care. It can offer great care to them. So the logistics of traveling can be very stressful. But I guess the message here is there's a lot of stress on patients, and these patients could be you. There's a lot of stress when you don't know what's wrong and when you're trying to find the problem that you have. Doctors want you to get the best care they can give you. And you want that for yourself as well. You want that for your parents. You want that for your children. You want that for your neighbors. It's important to care for our health, but in order to do that, we need to give our doctors the tools that they need. So today what I'm asking you, and as you think about my story, which could be anybody's story really, think about the people around you. Think about the importance of having this, the expertise and the tools locally. Think about that. I'm asking you to give tens of thousands of people hope, some peace of mind, and possibly help save their lives. The Montfort Hospital has all the winning ingredients. What they're telling you today is that they're missing one important piece to help people with heart problems, and I certainly support their quest in getting this CT scan. So I hope that you can do that as well. Please help them, help you. Thank you very much for your time.
Let's hear it for Caroline Disson. Merci beaucoup. My mom would be very proud if she could have been here this morning. Her son up here on the podium with all these doctors. I was a disappointment. And, as my friend Jeff Lalonde would say up here, with a true athlete. Thank you, merci everyone for coming out to this, the first annual Montfort Hospital President's Breakfast in support of the Cardiac CT Scanner Campaign. Bienvenue au premier petit-déjeuner du président annuel en appuyant la campagne Ton densitomètre avec module cardiaque. In English and in Ottawa, welcome to the FAM-HPB ISOT CCSC. J'espère de tout mon cœur que ce déjeuner sera un grand succès. Et je tiens à remercier Dr. Leduc, ses illustrés collègues, Chuck Bordelot et à Christine Ségouin et son équipe à la Fondation pour m'avoir impliqué dans cette campagne. C'est un plaisir et un honneur pour moi de faire ce que je peux et de rendre honneur au travail exceptionnel que vous faites pour la population d'Ottawa. When I was a kid, my brother and I would go out and we'd shovel snow from people's driveways. And we'd get paid 50 cents or $1, just to give you an idea of how young I am. We'd get paid that 50 cents or $1 when the job was done. And that's how we were raised. You got paid when the job was done. And ever since, I've never liked asking people for money until I've done the work. But in my profession, if you wait until you're finished with the criminal trial, getting paid can sometimes be difficult. You know, the guy's in jail, it's a little difficult to collect. I'm from Laval, a city where, when I was growing up, we were told not to cross La Belle Boulevard, or the Frenchies would get us. And I suspect the Frenchies were told the same thing, not to cross La Belle Boulevard, or les maudits blocs would get them. So how, or more importantly, or why, there's a guy, a tête carré, who doesn't like to ask for money, agreed to chair a Montfort campaign to raise $2.5 million to purchase a cardiac CT scanner, un tomodensitometre. The how was pretty easy. My friend, Chief of Police Chuck Borlow, with whom I have worked closely in the community and other projects and organizations, avec qui j'ai travaillé dans la communauté, m'avait demandé d'être impliqué. And there are two reasons why I agreed to chair this campaign. Because the cardiac CT scanner will save lives, possibly the lives of our family members or friends. Je ne souhaite surtout pas qu'un de vos proches soit la prochaine à souffrir d'une crise cardiaque à Ottawa. Loin de là. Mais si cela arriverait, assurons-nous que cette personne reçoive les meilleurs soins et qu'elle aura les meilleures chances de survie et de guérison complète. The second reason is because the best place for the first cardiac CT scanner in the National Capital Region is at the Montfort Hospital. For those of you who don't work or volunteer there, let me tell you a little bit about the recent history of the Montfort. After the hospital was saved by the likes of Gisèle Lalonde, Michel de Corville-Nicole, Ron Caza, Jerry Savoie, and Marie Belanger, the Montfort began to develop centers of excellence, like the Family Birthing Center, where my friends Dennis and Dorothy Jackson have had more grandchildren than the Ottawa Senators have had coaches. My wife, Angela's unofficially adopted daughter, who is a nurse, wisely chose to have her premature baby at the Montfort, and the extraordinary care that they and thousands of others have received is helping to build a next generation loyal to the Montfort. I've spent many hours in the Montfort ICU in the past few weeks with a Montfort champion. But I doubt that there are many ICUs in the world where the president and CEO of the hospital, Dr. Bernard Leduc, out of concern for that patient's welfare, spends hours in that same patient's room. With the cardiac CT scanner, the Montfort will develop yet another center of excellence in cardiac diagnosis and care. We will continue to work closely with the world-class Heart Institute. The diagnosis of the trauma and the extent of the damage will be known within minutes instead of days, and the treatment can start immediately. Take a moment and think about your spouse, your parents, your friends, and the fact that the life of any one of them might be saved by this technology. We are people, everybody in this room, We're people who love life. Nous avons une joie de vivre incomparable. And every one of us has lost someone we love or been with someone as they fought to hold on. What we would have done, just about anything, to give them a better chance at life. We have a chance today, right here, to make sure the Montfort is ready for that day when someone we love will need this technology. That day, it will be too late to offer to help. We have to prepare in advance. And with your help, the Montfort will have the technology to give our loved ones a better and stronger chance to live. Dr. Leduc mentioned that the CT scanning technology is in its teenage years. And when he mentioned that, many of us winced at the prospect of having to fund a teenager-related project. If every person here today commits to $1,000 a year for the next 3 years, that would be close to $500,000, 1/5 of our goal. $1,000 a year works out to be about 1 muffin and 1 coffee per day. Tim Hortons, mind you, not Starbucks. Everyone here can do $1,000 a year, and most of us can and hopefully will do more. At this point, I would ask all of the table captains, the capitaines de table, to stand. If we could please have all of the table captains standing and be recognized for their help. Merci. Recognized for their help in herding all of you cool cats here this morning. Je demanderai maintenant aux capitaines des tables de distribuer les pochettes d'informations à leurs invités. Lorsque vous offrez votre enveloppe, je vous propose une petite réflexion. Pensez à ce que vous feriez si un de vos proches avait besoin d'une intervention médicale aujourd'hui pour sauver sa vie. I would now ask the table captains to hand out the presentation folders to their guests and for you to open your envelope. And as you open your envelope, I would ask you to take a moment and consider what you would do if someone you love needed life-saving health care today. Table captains, sponsors, and friends, I know that it is often an expensive proposition to continue to be my friend. I appreciate your friendship, your time, and your generosity. With your help, the Montfort will be there for our loved ones. Pour toi, mon cœur. Un gros merci au capitaine de table pour avoir invité des gens si généreux. Je vous demande de ramasser les enveloppes de vos invités avant de partir ce matin. In a few moments, if I can ask each of the table captains to collect the envelopes of your guests before they leave this morning. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
I just wanted to say a quick word as well before everyone takes off this morning. My name is Matt Scooby. I am the weekend anchor at CTV Ottawa and also on Saturday and Sunday mornings on Newstalk 580 CFRA. And I have the great privilege to also be involved in the For You Sweetheart campaign, which we are going to officially launch hopefully in the next few weeks. And I just wanted to, again, I'm very excited and at Bell Media we're also very excited to support this wonderful campaign in order to raise the $2.5 million for the CT with a specialized cardiac module. My grandfather was a doctor in Thunder Bay. For many, many years, he was a GP, and I think that medicine is very close to my family and my mom and my grandma when I think about it. And I think that, you know, with the words of everyone that said today, the doctors and Lawrence, I couldn't be more proud and I couldn't be more excited to be a part of a campaign like this. It's going to bring this kind of technology, the first of its kind, to the National Capital Region. So I want to thank you in advance for your generosity this morning. Be sure to look CTV to all the radio stations, so TSN 1200, Magic 100, 580 CFRA,
New Country 94, you're going to hear all sorts of ads on there for us. So please encourage your family and friends to donate to this wonderful campaign. And again, you're going to hear a lot more from me over the next little while, but I wanted to, again, say thank you very much, appreciate it. I'm very excited to be involved with Christine and Montfort. So thank you again for coming this morning, and we look forward to your future donations and support. Thank you.
Je vais juste mentionner, thank you, Matt. Puis pour nos amis francophones aussi, n'oubliez pas, nous avons une campagne de publicité aussi avec la radio francophone communautaire Unique FM 94,5. Alors, this concludes the breakfast this morning. I'd like to thank everyone personally for attending. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I'm very moved and I truly, truly appreciate it. Merci tout le monde d'avoir participé ce matin en si grand nombre et je vous souhaite une agréable journée. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.